My grandpa told me this, back when I was a youngin'. B 1910 to 1920, in Wisconsin Northwoods. Grandpa is 15 or so, hunting with two of his brothers, who are a year younger and older, respectively. Grandpa goes into brush to flush out deer, 'cause he's good at making a racket. Goes down by the creek to see if he can suss up some watering does. Sees something weird down by creek bed, goes closer. It's a pile of bones, with some meat still on them, covered in a cloud of flies. Grandpa moves in even closer, to get a better look. Turns out the flies are actually mosquitoes, which is weird as fuck, seeing as it's November. Prods bones over with rifle muzzle. Human fucking skull. Grandpa just about oh shit. JPEGs himself. Just then, hears a grunt from the other side of the creek. Grandpa whips around. Old Ojibwe in overalls and a flannel, just staring at him. Grandpa notices he's got yellow eyes. Ojibwe bares his teeth and lunges at Grandpa. Grandpa fires 30-30 at him. Ojibwe runs/limps away, clutching his belly. Grandpa runs back to his brothers, yelling the whole way. Gets to brothers, and they say, "Yeah, shut up, we know, we saw." Grandpa says, "Saw what?" "The wolf you shot." "What?" "Yeah, Grandpa, it was a lousy shot, too." "Why'd you have to gut shoot him like that?" "Lousy way to kill a wolf." "So my grandpa shot a Wendigo." "At least he said he shot a Wendigo." But I'm inclined to believe the story, as he wasn't a man taken to lying. Be about 3 years ago. Livin' in rural Oregon. Willamette Valley. Hunting turkeys with friends in the deep woods. 'Bout 2 miles or so in the woods. We parked our rigs on a logging road. Nothin' seen that day, so we start heading back. Gettin' dark. Gets real dark. Hear literally blood-curdling scream off behind us. That is no fucking turkey. No animal in that neck of the woods makes that noise. We all shit bricks and start hustling it back. Hear rustling and cracking and snapping of tree limbs behind us. Fucker is chasing us and screaming at us. Near the end, running back to the trucks. Get in the vehicles like a bat out of hell. Headlights come on. I shine fucking everywhere. At least 4 pairs of eyes staring right at us. Nope the fuck out of there and drive away. What the fuck was that shit, guys? Alright friends, I'm posting this shit. My party had passed out that night in the West Oregon woods, filthy and exhausted from carrying 3 blacktail through dense forest and onto a small section of beach where we would be picked up in a friend's motorboat and carried north to a marina about a dozen miles up the coast. We carried carbines, mostly, for weight reduction and ease of movement. I had an M14 with a synthetic stock that did pretty well, but I was still beat after carrying it all day with my gear. Most of us had SKSs and ARs, but I liked 308, so it was what I used. I had a Inertil M4010X powered scope, similar to the setup the Marines used. I give you these seemingly trivial details so that you can better visualize how unprepared we were for that thing. You see, legend has it, that one is made when hunting parties starve. We laughed it off when the old Indian in that diner told us this, as we had carried enough provisions to stay out there twice our stay. I couldn't begin to count the amount of jerky, MREs, canned meat, and spam we brought, good for it, too, as all of that food had successfully clogged us, effectively saving most of the pairs of pants in our outfit, as well as the gallons and gallons of medicinal alcohol. The fear that the Wendigo might come lurching at us through the night didn't faze us, as we were armed to the teeth, every man carrying his carbine and at least one pistol, such as my 1911. We took our deer in the first 2 days, and decided we would go home. We had grown up together, so the hunt wasn't so much for the deer, as the getting drunk and shooting guns and being around each other in a safe, outdoor, banjo-free environment, although I would have preferred facing raping, backwoods, Man-eating rednecks to that son of a bitch. So, here we lay, the fire burning low and red in the night, the grumbles and snores of a dozen men from 25 to 30 rumbling quietly in the night. I slept lightly, but I slept well and I slept enough. It came as a surprise to be awoken by a boot and a whispered plea for me to wake up. One of our number, a second cousin of mine, was kneeling next to me with his Wasser 1063 across his thigh. He gestured to the wood line, and I saw it, outlined against the moon, roughly 12 feet tall, antlers protruding from its crown. Before I knew it I was facing it in the prone, my crosshairs lined up on what I hoped was its center mass. Remember telling you about my scope, being a fixed power? Well, I had the option of taking a surplus ANPVS-10 that a certain first sergeant friend of mine had managed to make disappear, but, for reasons of nostalgia, as well as the fact that I would be day hunting most of the time, I took the Inertil. That's why 8 of us came back and not 12. It was closer. It had been about 200 yards off when we first saw it, but now it was more like 75. It had jumped, somehow or another, or it had been big enough to simply pull itself closer. If it did that again, it would be on top of us. Without time to wake the camp, I fired 3 rounds in rapid succession. In those 3 rounds, I lost the lives of 4 men and the sanity of 2, possibly 3 if you count myself. Everyone behind us was up in a flash, the sounds of weapons being charged echoing itself several times. Everyone else went prone and began scanning, and someone with an NV spotting scope, the resident rich bitch IIRC, said they saw a body. I looked and saw it, too. We lit it up with floodlights, and beheld a monstrosity. Before we could mag dump, it was up, ripping 2 men open with tooth and claw. I thought to grab my backpack, as many others had not. It had my ammo and medical supplies, as well as a small radio. We were sprinting into the jungle with flashlights, the thud of hundreds of pounds of leg tromping behind us. We were about 300 yards ahead of it, but it was closing. Someone turned a flashlight its way and disappeared, his light spinning and falling to the ground. Another went back after him and suffered the same fate. We realized the thudding had stopped, and assumed the beast was busy with its meal. We stopped and tried to recuperate, counting ammo, counting supplies, counting heads. We lacked 4, and each was explained. The beast had given chase and it had won, partially. The 2 back at the camp had likely been taken by now, and were in all likelihood being ripped up and devoured. That was when I think I lost it, because I remember thinking that a normal person is fazed by thinking things like that. I didn't vomit, like I should have. I did, however, chamber around and load a fresh mag and check to see that my sidearm was ready to go, so that when it killed us, whoever eventually found us could see that my pistol was empty, and that we had died trying. I hefted my pack properly and loaded my weapon, and we took shifts, some watching while others slept. We were tired and needed to double back to the shoreline so that we could catch a boat and leave. I tried getting the Forestry Service on my radio, to no avail. I think I might have heard a response from the Coast Guard, but that was probably just white noise. I won't waste time explaining, but I'm fairly certain the beast had something to do with the radios not working. We got up at 5:30 and started walking north. Our plan was to get out of the predator's range and then go west and to extract from the shoreline. We walked for 3 hours. Atop a ridge we were able to look back down and see the wreck of what was our camp. We turned and ran, and someone accidentally dropped an oil lantern and a cigarette at the same time, according to plan. We sprinted dead on through the woods until we found an old logging trail, which took us to the northwest, away from the now growing wildfire and carnivorous monster behind us. My gut told me we weren't, out of the woods yet, though. That, and the resounding roar that sounded off the valley over the crackling of flames as we descended towards the ocean. Once again, we ran, and we ran, and we ran, and then we stopped and coughed because of the smoke, and we ran some more. We were exhausted to say the least, and the camelbacks wouldn't last forever. We were going to run ourselves to death or die fast, and I had made my choice. I stopped and began covering myself with leaves and foliage. Eventually, upon realizing the manner of the situation, so did everyone else. And there we lay, ready to die. And the thing, the Wendigo, came as he always had, in the same old way. After a half hour of catching our breath and trying to bear the ever-growing heat of the fire, a figure emerged from the trees opposite of the small low place we had occupied. A little bear, no more than a cub, afraid and looking for Mama, carried himself over towards us, and, sensing that something was wrong, ran by us and away from the monster, the fire, or both. We shared chuckles and likely prayers that Mama wouldn't come by our way. The last thing we wanted was to have to deal with a pissed-off bear, especially in the state we were in. We looked up from the bear into the face of the monster, and the rounds began to fly. I burned through 3 10-round mags, all of my rounds hitting mostly center mass. We flooded the thing. It tried to walk and faltered, teetering on its trunk-sized legs, and recovering, lurching forwards towards us, its blackened, pock-marked, decaying skin buckling and stretching over its muscles and bones. It was within 15 feet of me and being eaten alive by the surplus 7.62x54R, by 39. And 5.56x45 rounds that filled the air like so many angry hornets. It was close enough and I was ready to die. I came up to a kneel and brought the sights on my 1911 to its heart, and fired 8 rounds in rapid succession, sending it falling back like a giant oak. The firing stopped. I reloaded, and, ever carefully, approached it. We stood observing it, our rifles at low ready, or in the crooks of our arms. I had my rifle trained on its head, as did a number of us. My cousin from earlier had succeeded in blowing all his 7.62x39 rounds, and had drawn his Browning high power, which was leveled with the head. The beast looked to be humanoid, with a deer's head, and traits of bear and dog mixed in, almost as if someone had taken a bunch of parts and put them all together into one giant being, which is basically what the Indian in the restaurant had told us the Wendigo was. The flesh seemed to have been rotten and broken before we fired into it, the skin appearing mangy and filthy. The fire was getting closer, so we backed off, and it of course stood right back up. I emptied my last mag into it, and drew the Colt Series 80, and fired 8 more rounds, my shoulders dampening from my now bleeding ears. The fire was within 30 yards of us now. We strode forward, firing and reloading over and over again, until we found ourselves standing among the flames, the beast already burning. We turned and ran, and it collapsed once more, its entire body engulfed. Texas has some pretty spooky shit. Been here all my life. Back when I was a kiddo, my old man and I would hunt with my older brother and sister out in Kerrville. I remember our trailer would periodically smell like that rusty/blood smell when we'd camp, but we always got used to it. There was some scary shit that went out there. I distinctly remember when I was 11 and my dad shot a deer right behind the front shoulder, but it boogied, so we had to go tracking. It was around mid-November, started to get dark real quick, so I had my SKS, which I'd been killing deer with since I was 6, on me with a dull-as-fuck flashlight. My sister was back at camp cooking and reading, while we followed this blood trail. Being crafty, my dad put me in this valley where we found a pretty good pool of it, and I sat atop a boulder just to mark the spot while he took my brother and put him further out past the tree line deep along the ravine. Where we were there were tons of rocks all over the place, so I got up on that boulder and had a pretty good vantage, also had a decent clearing of about 50 to 75 yards around me. Well, the night started to set, and the temp was around 50 or so, dropping into the 40s with me in the middle of this clearing with a light overcast and a full moon. I remember clicking the light off to save the battery and letting my eyes adjust to my surroundings, seeing the alternating pitch black to relatively moonlit valley in decent clarity. Just about 30 or 40 minutes after my brother and dad started tromping through the woods leaving me alone, I remember hearing some coyotes and seeing them on the outskirts of the clearing, not necessarily circling, though they paused for a bit to look and then continued on. I sat quietly on the boulder, watching nature go by with the wind picking up slowly, giving a gentle strobing effect with the cloud overcast just alternating with light/no light. I heard them yip and howl for a few minutes. And then they started to fade away. Minutes after that I heard a resounding shot and report of impact, like a boom with a quick thud after it, meaning it was some distance between the two, and figured either they found the deer and put it down at range or somebody shot a coyote. Round that time I heard a scream which got me real worried, then just utter silence. The wind stopped howling, the squatty pine trees stopped rustling, I couldn't hear any of the yelping of coyotes in the distance. Just dead silence. After a bit, I started hearing some light thuds on my right, like rocks banging together up a ways along the hillside. On the furthest distance, about 75 yards of the clearing, I saw a few rocks rolling down the side, watching them when they first came into view, bounce along, tumbling. Then just listening as the clouds blacked out the clearing. And then watching them again come to a complete stop after a bit. Conventional thought snapped to me through the biting cold and I got real low on the boulder, with the SKS ready in my hands aiming at the point of origin, just hearing my breathing contrast harshly against the mind-numbing quiet. A few more rocks did this from the same spot, and I saw a dark outline through the trees, not quite in the clearing but rather a few yards deep in the trees. I saw a pair of antlers when the light picked back up, and when it went dark, I could hear some heavy breathing along the edge of the clearing. Me, thinking it was the injured deer, keyed a little radio that we all had 3 times, to signal distress, so that my dad and brother would come back. I turned the volume real low and sat quietly on the rock, making sure not to silhouette myself as I peered into the darkness with my scope, trying to get a good picture. I remember seeing the outline, somewhat upright in the light like it was a buck that stretched its neck out. It going dark, and then nothing. I panicked a bit, despite being just 11, knowing the hooves of deer should clack pretty fucking loud out here if they moved at all, especially if it was that goddamn silent. So I sat and waited, not moving a muscle as that pool of blood next to me seemed to lazily waft itself into my nose. It wasn't particularly overpowering or anything, but it cut in pretty strong as I scanned again when the clouds cleared up for a few moments, looking for anywhere that thing could have gone. My radio keyed back twice, meaning somebody wanted to talk, and my stomach dropped. I keyed 3 times again and saw lights off over my left shoulder where my dad and brother went down to track after the buck, still a few hundred or so yards off in the distance. I sat there alone, jittering quietly in the cold in an absolute void, with a lingering hope that my dad and brother would catch up. The light went out again. And I could hear those rocks rolling, just a bit from a spot just a little further up the hill and a few yards closer. The rocks rolled into vision when the cloud passed, and when I looked up, I could see the dark figure of antlers like 60-something yards away with a few trees in between. Knowing where my brother and dad were, leveled out the rifle and started to wait for a clear shot. It stepped out and I was a hair away from the trigger falling when it went dark, so I waited patiently for the moon to come out again. When it did, whatever was out there disappeared completely, which didn't make much sense considering it was behind a few trees with some considerable openings to each side. I scanned again in the direction when the wind picked back up and the trees started to move, with the hillside coming alive again. I heard the footsteps of my family behind me around 90 yards out and slowly crept off the boulder to go meet them, keeping that rifle close to me the whole entire time. When we met, my brother started giving me shit about how I was screaming and crying being all alone while he and my old man were tracking blood, being the good brother that he is. When I told them I hadn't made a sound, they raised their brows and started claiming I was full of shit. I asked about the shot I heard and apparently it was a ways off in the next property over, since we were on the property line. They found a pretty good blood trail that left the origin of where I was, in just about a straight line all the way to some crushed brush about 400 yards out, having this deer bleed profusely the whole entire time, which was somewhat unreal. Then after the trail ended they moved around for a few thousand yards or so just to scan the area when they heard the shot, and it sounded like it was over the low fence line. I told them about seeing what I could describe as a deer, but I didn't say much on the subject, except that it left without me getting a good look at it. We hiked it back up the hill in a staggered column, with my brother picking up the rear with his lever-action .243 and my dad leading with his 7mm rem mag, still scanning around as we made our way back to the truck. When we got there, my brother Cody and I hopped in the bed of the truck with him overlooking the cabin and me looking over the tailgate, and we started our way down a pretty long trail to the camp house. After a mile or so we had to take a detour through rough brush because a few trees collapsed on the trail, so we started going round through some clearings in the Dodge. Just before we got back onto the trail, it got real tight with the trees, and we had to get out and walk in front of the truck to make sure it could fit. After getting everything cleared out and altering some limbs, we assumed the same spots on the truck and were just about to get back on the road when I spotted another pair of different antlers nestled in between the brush. At that moment I hollered to my dad, who, with his windows rolled down, took out his 1911 out of the center console and blasted a buck between the eyes with a 230 grain HST, dropping it on the spot. Turns out that was the deer he was looking for, but it ended up a few miles down the path with a heart shot, which is fucking impossible. It looked like it had a good gouge on it just a bit behind the point of impact on the ribs, like it had fallen on punji sticks or something. There was no blood trail near anywhere, no nothing. Just that deer standing between two bushes by itself with a nice assortment of gouges in it. We loaded it up in the back of the truck and I sat on top of it with my SKS pointed at its head. For the rest of the night everything went according to plan. We skinned and quartered the deer up and iced the meat, but over the next 8 years or so my brother and I would still hear screams on our hunts at night when there shouldn't be people around for the next 10 or so miles. There were all kinds of burial grounds and shit on the land. We found piles of old arrowheads and Victorian-era utensils in old burned-down houses that had been there since the settlement of Texas. I told my sis about what had happened, she being the oldest of the kids, and she joked about Native American mythology and the Wendigo in a natural teasing manner. I'm not so sure it's a joke out there. Back in the winter of 2001, my youngest son and I were on our way from Boise, Idaho to Medford, Oregon. We had taken a car trailer to his old place in Boise in order to haul his non-running Jeep to his new place in Medford. We hit an area of heavy snow in the southern Cascades around 2 a.m. It took 45 minutes or so to get down the mountain. We had, of course, been drinking coffee to stay alert. About 25 miles west of the pass it became obvious that the last few quarts of coffee had to be drained. We stopped at a wide spot in the road near a summer tourist haunt deserted in winter. There is a gas station and ice cream joint on the west side of the road, closed this time of year, and no town or settlement within 30 miles. This is tall timber country, and unsettled. Across the road is a small parking area for the ice cream joint. It is paved and about 200 feet wide and 80 feet deep. I pulled in and as I stepped out with 45 on hip, it occurred to me in a flash that grabbing the 590 Mossy would be good. As we walked to the far end of the area to be well off the road, the hair on my arms and the back of my neck stood on end. The area directly to our front was open with a depth of 50 yards and a width of 100 yards. The night was clear and cold, 8 to 10 inches of snow on the ground, and with the moon almost full, so we could see quite well. While standing and taking a leak, with sun about 15 feet to my right, I saw, as if springing from the earth in front of us across the open area, 10 or 12 creatures moving rapidly back and forth in sort of a thatch weave pattern. These things, not human men, were close to 7 feet tall, thin, bipedal with long arms, medium-length gray fur, and damned fast on their feet. I brought the shotgun up and slid the safety off, as Son was drawing his .45. Subject to a very bad death, and to be slaughtered and eaten, not a logical process, gut feeling, and massively overwhelming. As they were moving about in front of us, more appeared and mixed among them, all the while running about fast in front of us. Son and I were backing toward the truck. I would not present my back to them, and some of them peeled off right and left in an encirclement movement. They were rolling in fast from the sides now. I could smell and feel their presence. We got to the truck loaded on adrenaline and ready to kill, as we both knew we were in grave danger. We piled into the truck locked doors. I had keys out and ready. As my butt neared the seat, I had the engine lit and trans in gear and gas pedal mashed in one motion. Adrenaline is great stuff. As we fled, yes fled, something very close by let out a ululating scream of rage and pain. I believe one or more of the group had gotten really close to us in their pursuit and I ran over the foot of one of them. Yeah, they were that close. We rolled onto the highway and I told Son to watch the bed of the pickup as well as the trailer. He already was indexed to the rear with the shotgun. We hauled ass for at least 20 miles before the feeling of grave danger started to abate. The feeling that nailed both of us, as we discussed soon afterward, was one of being prey, and soon to be slaughtered and eaten. I am not easily led, and neither believe or disbelieve all the Bigfoot, ghost, and werewolf stuff. In fact, I am skeptical. Son was speaking with a co-worker about 6 months later who had grown up in Prospect, Oregon, about 30 miles south of Union Creek where the incident took place. He asked Jake if he had ever heard of any strange goings-on in the area. Jake went ashy white and pretty much retold the above tale. He says to avoid the place at night. A family friend, a 25-year retired cop not given to flights of fancy and an excellent observer, had a tale very similar from a year before. I told my wife of this event, of course. She looked at me at the beginning as though I had developed a third eyeball in the center of my forehead. That was from shock. She did believe me, but did not wish to hear any details. She said the tale gave her chills. Me too. As I write this, hair on back of neck and forearms is sticking up. I have not gone back to explore, and would not without a large group of shotgun and flamethrower equipped men with me. Son and I are both sane, sober persons, and not taken to hysteria. We were very wide awake as things transpired. We saw and smelled what was there. As a sidebar, neither of us heard footfalls from the creatures. They were silent until I heard one as we were getting the hell out of there. To my knowledge, and I have researched, there is nothing that matches these creatures, unless one considers old legends and folk tales of were creatures. To conclude, I have to fall back on Elmer Keith's famous line, "Hell, I was there." I have an experience. Pretty sure it was fear more than anything, but my friend's account backed up the whole skinwalker/Wendigo part of it. Be me. B16. Going out for some airsoft. At our base station shack. Teammates either called sick or just didn't show. Just me and a friend. We have the great idea of some IRL most dangerous game. Of course I go out first. I leave my rifle and pistol, air shit, and grab my 22 as we are contracted to kill off varmint for the owner of the land so we can use it for free. Plan to hunt after and don't want to hike back for the rifle or if I saw something while I was out there. We are using about 5 square miles of forest and swamp, but mostly swamp. In the really swampy sections there is only one way through with tight bottlenecked areas. Get to one such area. Get hit with the smell. The one and only. Blood and copper, all with a burning undertone to it. I am already freaking out a good bit about the idea of being hunted. Now this is really putting the spooks up to 11. I start freaking out. Nope. GIF. See dead deer at the narrowest point of the bottleneck. It was gored like I have never seen. It was just totally devastated. Only concern, blood was still crimson red. Fresh. Nothing seemed wrong with the deer, perfectly healthy doe, other than being exploded. No predators that would do that. Fox and coyote could never get a deer like that. Too healthy to be natural cause. This fucker was attacked. Was hoping to stage an ambush here and am spooked, but not enough to ruin the game for us. Start booking it to my second choice for an ambush. En route I come across the smell again. I am breathing heavy from running and take a huge inhale of it. It burns the lungs. See a pool of blood. Assume it was a cat or a raccoon, but it looks like it just took a frag grenade up the ass. Just a mass of gore, blood, and some fur. Found a mangled skull up the path a little more. Hole in it like someone just shoved their finger through the skull. I am now at 300% spook. I continue the sprint. Get to a place we both know well to get to. I get on the radio and try to tell the hunter to back off. He doesn't respond. Fucking typical. I fire 3 shots into the air. He gets on the radio then. Tell him to stop the game and get to me, I don't feel safe going back. Feeling of being watched is hitting hard. I run to the location I gave him and wait. Hyperventilating. He meets with me, rifle drawn. He had to go by the deer. He had to have smelled that smell. He is asking me what is going on and if I am okay. Said I looked whiter than paper and really sick. I explain and he says he saw it all too. Says he saw something across the swamp when he got to the deer. Says it looked like a motherfucking deathclaw but with patchy fur and what looked like horns. We talk it over and after what we saw we were not about to go back that way, not with the chance of that being there. We have the plan to follow a trail that will get us away from the swamp for a while and try to go to the nearest road and walk it back to the shack. 7 to 8 miles total, but it is early enough to be doable. 5 miles over roads that cut through fields. 2.5 miles through woods. We set out. We leave the woodland part and get back in a swamp, about 2 miles since we began. We hit another bottleneck. Swamp to the left and 50-foot thick briar patch to the right that only leads to a ravine. We smell it again. We see it again. Another deer. Mutilated like the other. In almost the same way. Like the mutilation was methodical and was intentionally repeated. Decent buck, totally healthy, whatever my friends saw was what killed it. No other way about it. We continue, both with raging heartburn and terror sweat. Just a section of swamp and we are at the road. We have to use a fallen tree to cross a pretty big mud flat. We start panicking a whole shit ton. Thinking how vulnerable we are on that branch. Thinking that we would be dead for sure if we fell in. The smell washes over us. We aren't moving towards it, it is moving towards us. We get off. Sprint for the road. Make it. We see another deer. Struck by a car. We set off down the road for our way back. No ambushes here, this is a nice open field. Feeling safe. We start trying to make sense of it all now that we have a long walk and are calming down. We come up with a theory, which is still the most valid that I know of. The beast, as we did not know for a long while what the fuck a Wendigo was, came across the deer while they were still in a herd. They run in the only direction available. Beast hits the first one at the bottleneck and the other 2 book. The cat/coon is just in the wrong place at the wrong time and gets blow the fuck up just because it was moving. Second deer gets caught at the bottleneck like the first one. Last one ran to the road and got creamed, beast was scared of the car to pursue. Logic helps distract us from the fact that we just encountered the supernatural. We get back to the shack. Within 2 meters of the shack the smell hits us. It is stronger the closer we get to the door and we see that the door is ajar. Fucking no. Web. Run to my truck. Grab jerrycan out of the back. Open it up and throw it onto the roof. Toss shit ass Zippo knockoff up there too. BTFO fucker.png. Within 20 seconds we hear a huge crash. It just ran through the back wall. We see a 10-foot tall mass of fire and flailing arms sprinting into the woods. Scared like a motherfucker. I drive like hell at 90 plus down a gravel road getting out of there. Call landowner/farmer and tell him that we don't need the land anymore on the ride home. Never return out of fear of beast and my chances of getting shot by farmer for starting a fire. Not a regular here on /X. This is probably my second or third time even lurking. But I was sharing my scariest nope experience with my friend and I thought I would come back here to see what was up. B15. Hanging with friend at my place. Gets real late, around 1 a.m. He wants to go home, so we walk back to his house. Live in the middle of the suburbs, on a road that is in between two subdivisions. We own 4 acres of wooded forest behind backyard. Have to walk through forest to get to friend's sub. Walk goes like normal, we part ways at the halfway between my house and his. Walk back home alone like I've done many times before. On last stretch of trail before my main backyard. See giant 7 to 8 feet tall all white humanoid figure to my left at my 10 o'clock. Lanky arms and long legs. Bald, pale, hairless. Completely stands out against the darkness of the night. Looks like it just turned to notice me as well. Looks right at me. Nope. Figure runs away from me. I run as fast as I could back home. Locked all of the doors. Closed all of the shades/blinds. Shaking from fear and confusion. In no way do I believe in anything supernatural. And 7 years later, I still have no scientific explanation for this. I told this story on /X before, and 3 other people responded to me with similar stories, saying that they were in the woods and saw the exact same thing. I asked them where they were when it happened. We were all from Michigan. Someone else came in, linked to all of our posts and said, it's called a Wendigo. A Native American forest demon. There was a reason why they respected the woods. I have a story to share, but it happened during the day at my ranch. Also, I'm not good at telling stories, but I figured this incident was relevant to the thread. Enjoy taking girlfriend out for rides on the ATV. Have the habit of fucking out in the wilderness. Know when it's going down because she'll just strip and bend over something, prompting me to chase her down. One day take a ride out to the pond, struggle through some brush to get right up to the water's edge and enjoy the scenery. She gets up to go squat. Look over, she laughs and screams stop peeking. A sexless half hour goes by and we pack up to ride back to the house. Once there, she's having a snack on the porch while I'm playing with the rifle. See something twitchy and white near the brush, just up the trail leading from the pond. Wander about just beyond the gate to get a better angle. It's my girlfriend's pale ass. It's jerking slightly, like a poorly attempted twerk. Turn attention from the scope back to my girlfriend, who is blissfully eating her Doritos. Focus in again, it's moving a bit more fluidly like it's backing up against something. The head bobs up and down, bending awkwardly back like her hair was getting pulled. Dirty as fuck souls. Girlfriend always keeps her boots on outdoors. Then later, just before nightfall. Get ready to leave before shit gets pitch black. Sky is a beautiful familiar orange, but most of the ground has become blanketed in shadows. Peeking, shrieks out from the distance. Girlfriend, paranoid as ever, pokes her head out of the truck and looks around, asks if I heard something. Let her know it was the coyotes, since they usually do start yelping and shit around that hour. Start the short drive out back to the highway. Peeking. Peeking. Girlfriend looks a little troubled, turns on the radio. They sound like they're talking. Weird shit always happens at the ranch. But it's mostly just what me and my dad come across. Remains and whatnot. Be 12 or 13, not sure. Be at scout camp in Alberta, out in Kananaskis near the mountains. Be staying in small wood cabins, all of them pretty far away from each other and almost right in a forest. The surrounding area is nothing but forest, dark as hell. Being the retarded 12-year-olds that we were, the four of us from our cabin decided to take our propane lantern and go sneak around in the forest. Walk along a boardwalk that led to the main bonfire area, go past that and deeper into the woods. We all start to get kinda freaked out and we decide we should head back. 15 minutes later realize we're lost. By this time we're starting to panic and are getting even more turned around in the process. Think I hear something in the trees, tell the rest of my friends to shut up. Definitely heard something, wait in silence for a bit and hear it again. Rustling of the undergrowth and breaking of twigs. Does not sound at all like the way a person would walk through the forest. We are all standing there petrified, fight or flight hasn't quite kicked in yet. The noises start getting closer and it breaks through some trees that were about 15 to 20 feet ahead of us. All we see are a pair of glowing fucking eyes, too high off the ground to be a deer or anything, glinting off the light of the lantern. Dumbass David drops the fucking lantern, the mantle smash and there goes our only light source besides the moon. We all fucking run like none of us have ever run before, in some random ass direction. Run/speed walk for what feels like half an hour, make it to the fucking highway. Walk back down the highway to the entrance to our camp, find our way back to our cabin in the dark somehow, locked the door and blocked it off with one of the bunk beds and had no sleep. We told a bunch of people but nobody believed us, of course. It was probably the scariest time of my life, running through this dark forest, feeling like you're being hunted. B18. Living at grandma's. Really strict, made me go to bed at midnight. I didn't give a fuck, watched movies and read for most the night. About a week into our stay. About 2 a.m., window open as it was hot as balls. Randomly look out window and see two glowing orbs, about the size of golf balls, about 8 or 9 feet off ground, slowly moving through forest. Looks like what I saw before, feeling of dread. Takes what seems like forever, but they finally get out of sight. Quickly close window and curtains. This is where it begins. Grandma insisted blinds be closed at sundown, never really gave a reason why. Almost every night, hear tapping on living room window. Never really gave a fuck, was out in the country so I figured it was an animal. One night she goes to bed early and I don't close living room curtains. Look over just in time to see pale, bony, just overall misshapen hand, fingers were too long and it looked kind of stretched, come out of darkness and tap on window, then beckon to me. Closed those fuckers quick. Aside from my grandma insisting the curtains be closed, my grandpa always carried a gun with him when we went in a woods, and they never went out after dark. They knew about it, but they would never admit it. Given the area and everything I saw, and that I would hear my name being called from outside sometimes, I kind of feel like a Wendigo was trying to lure me out there. When I was 8, 21 now, my grandpa told us a story about this thing called the elk screecher. It was a thing that took the form of half man, half elk, and would screech from within the woods. It would prey on campers and people wandering out on their own, and then steal their skin. My grandpa worked on the reservations of northern Arizona as a substance abuse counselor and said that that's what they call them up around there. Skinwalkers are an old Native American legend from ages back, but are very different than the elk screecher legend. If anything, this whole craze started a bit back because of interest over a creepypasta or two more than anything. I don't feel skinwalker is really a correct term for these creatures, because the ones of native legend are witch doctors and so on that take the shape of animals. What everyone describes here is more alien sounding than any legend I've heard. Wendigo sounds like probably the best fit, to be honest. Why come up with a new name when one already exists? First up, a short explanation. I have a strange way of sensing things. I'm terrible at interaction with people, but with anything else living, I pick shit up very quickly and seem to be capable of limited understanding past the human norm. Not things like voices, or any schizo shit, but I've always just been unnaturally good at understanding animals. With that out of the way, let's talk about a creature known as a Wendigo. For any who don't know and are too lazy to Google, a Wendigo is a Native American creature that used to be human. In layman's terms, it's a part animal space-time transcending zombie. It's a person that lost themselves to being a cannibal, and wants nothing more than human flesh. They become terrifying in appearance, such as having the head of a stag with razor-sharp teeth, huge claws, and being like 7 to 9 feet tall. What's really scary is that once they target you as a meal, you're screwed, as they can control time and space to do shit like appear ahead of you should you run away, or put you in a temporal loop, or bend space around you so you only run in circles. Nasty creatures. Now I was going for a walk in some woods near where I live. I had my dog with me, and it was a sunny day. You could see those pretty golden rays of light shining through holes in the treetops. I smell something fucking awful, like meat rotting. I kept moving and the smell vanished, but I began to feel extremely uncomfortable, and my dog began to act skittish. I try to figure out what's wrong with my dog, but if we stop moving she just starts to freak out as if she wants to keep moving for fear of being caught. I'm scared myself at this point and we take up a brisk pace, heading deeper into the woods like a fucking genius. I get lost but keep moving, not really getting anywhere but deeper into the woods, and I begin scaring myself any time I so much as step on a twig. A sense of dread has overtaken me. It's becoming twilight now and I'm starting to wish I'd just been lazy and walked around my neighborhood a few times. The smell comes back but not as strong and there's nothing around. I feel like my heart is gonna give out on me at this point, so much adrenaline and fear I feel I might explode. I keep moving and I realize everything just stopped. Birds are silent, there's no leaves falling from trees, there's a beehive nearby that the bees are just kind of sitting on, none are flying around. And I just stop walking. I don't know why, and my dog stops too. We both just stop. I feel paralyzed with fear, and I don't understand why I don't just start walking when I see something about 40 feet away in the trees. It looks somewhat akin to the attached pick, but with twisting gnarly horns. My dog is growling at it lowly, and I can barely think. I start pleading for my life even though I have no reason to believe it's a threat, it's just giving off this aura of dread that I can't handle. Somewhere in all my blubbering and scrambling together sentences, I promise it that I'll help it find someone else and do it a favor if it leaves me alone. It heads off behind a tree and just vanishes. A long time later I get jumped by a douchebag who has a problem with me and a couple of his friends. He's been tormenting me for years, is not a productive member of society by any stretch of the imagination, and only lives to be an asshole and mooch off of his family and friends, whom he treats like shit. I head out to the woods and call out to what I at this point believe is a Wendigo after doing research. I feel its presence but don't feel the danger that came with it and tell the Wendigo about Sir Douche-a-lot. A month later his missing posters are all over town. He hasn't been seen since and everyone thinks he ran away, I'm not so sure though. Be about 730 weeks old. Live in a house deep in the woods. Hear noises at night. It sounds like Wendigos. Look out of my window. It is Wendigos. Run to closet. Wendigo. Run underneath my bed. Wendigo. Run to mom. Wendigo. Run to car. Not Wendigo. Get into car, then car is suddenly Wendigo. Get out of Wendigo and run into the woods. Trip on elephant bones, then, a skeleton popped out. Fight it? Mom sends to Bel Air. 1 week in Bel Air and all the Wendigos find me on Facebook. Get phone call. Who was phone? Wendigo. Meet Black Kid and we become friends. Black Kid hands me cigarette. Nope.jpg. Come on. Says Black Kid. Cave in to peer pressure. Start smoking cigarettes. Now 7,670 days old, give or take, I don't have cancer. I am cancer. I have an old hunting story possibly related to the Wendigo. I was 17 years old and my father and I had been hunting in Tungus, Alaska, during deer season. We were a few miles away from camp and already returning from a successful hunt with only a couple hours of sunlight left. I decided to stay behind for a bit to map the spot we had so much success with, and I guess to sort of test the directional skills my dad had been teaching me since forever, so he went ahead. Around 20 minutes later I finished my mapping and started heading back, cradling my rifle as I walked and watching my steps because it was pretty damp at the time. Suddenly I heard some twigs snap to my right and I instantly get on my knees and hunker in some brush, because at that moment I had seen the biggest buck I had ever seen in my life. It was behind a considerably large tree and from my point of view all I could see was the head looking out to the forest in the direction my dad had went. I carefully raised my rifle and as I looked through my scope I immediately knew something was off. Its eyes were a murky white and the lining of its mouth showed signs of an infection or dehydration. I guess you could say the lining of its mouth was gunky, and to top it off the fur was much thicker and untamed. Then it happened, it started moving. It came out from behind the tree gaining massive amounts of height and walking on only its hind legs. It was about 6'7" or 6'8" and the overall look to it was that it was a deer carcass. It started walking in the direction of my dad. I wasn't afraid at this point. I had heard of some hardcore hunters in the area wearing deer carcasses as camo. So I lowered my rifle and yelled to it. Hey. In that split moment it turned to me and snarled like a fucking demon hound. I raised my rifle and fired a warning shot because I sure as fuck never heard that sound before in my life. It wasn't phased and in that split moment it turned to advance towards me. I had no idea what was fucking going on at that point, because a large chunk of its rib cage looked like it had been mauled off but it still had enough strength to go apeshit. I relied on rationality and decided it was a buck with rabies, or something, just anything that could keep me from being afraid. I assessed that at that point I was in danger and as it started running on all fours towards me I fired a second shot and wounded it. It made the usual wounded buck noise, freaked out in some brush for a bit then got up and ran in the other direction on all fours. At that point I just put into my head that it was a wounded buck, and since I had taken a shot at it I was then responsible for finishing the job, so I pursued it. I followed its blood trail to a nearby clearing but I stopped dead in my tracks because I heard a commotion involving a bear a few hundred yards ahead. Sounded like a territorial fight, so I got my scent downwind and patched my pits and groin with mud and started heading back. I was not about to fuck with a bear. I found my father and told him the whole story, and he decided we should head back because a wounded animal is a hunter's responsibility, but it was too late so we saved it for the morning. The next morning the old man and I made it to where I had first spotted it. I explained everything in detail and he too figured it was just some sort of sick buck. We examined the foliage where it break-danced in pain and found odd, very thin clumps of hair that smelled of mold. My dad said he'd never seen fur like it and added some of it to his pouch. Then we followed the blood trail. We got to the point where I stopped and I showed him the direction where the bear commotion had occurred, and he then pointed out to me that the blood trail went in the same direction. We both looked at each other in a moment of relief, because it seemed that nature might have corrected itself and ended my hunt. We followed the blood to a clearing and my dad stopped and quickly put his hand to my shoulder and pointed farther out to about 30 yards away to a dead brown bear. We made our way to it and examined it in disbelief. It had been mauled severely, its stomach had been completely gutted and its entrails littered the ground around it. Its jawline was severely damaged, like something was able to grab both ends and break its jaw with sheer force. My father and I looked at each other for a moment of fright and immediately dismissed our hunt and headed home. To this day we don't know what could have done that, but man, it makes for a good campfire story. Brother's father comes from the same exact tribe that created the Wendigo. They still believe in it. Still believe in skinwalkers, but not the faggot fucking fat teen spooking 1/X posts about actual medicine men that transform into animals and help the tribe. Get to hear trippy stories from Brother's grandpa when we visit. Brother's grandpa is 16. Told to go into the forest and come back when he's used his own hands to, or created weapons, to kill a deer. He must drag or carry the entire deer back himself. He brings his own rations and water, even though it's forbidden. In the forest for a few days just waiting out a potential kill when he falls asleep. He wakes to some horns just below his tree. It's too dark to tell, but he's sure it's a massive deer. The antlers had to be atop a head around 7 to 8 feet tall. He's fearful, as a deer this size could easily kill him, and all he's made up until now is a semi-sharpened rock the size of his fist and a really crappy arrow. Figures if he can bash the head in 2 or 3 times before he gets kicked off, he might have a fighting chance and the highest praise once he returns. He waits for the antlers to just be a foot nearer. It's in position and he leaps. Bashes the head in a good 4 times before he's thrown 10 or 15 feet into the bushes. He quickly gets up, ready to dodge anything that might be kicking at him with hooves. He sees this grotesque head with the somewhat mangled body of a man. Claws of a bear. This thing's howling a terrible tremble to the pit of Grandpa's stomach. He runs as quickly as he can. Didn't know the forest as well as he should and quickly gets lost. He hears water, but remembers that the sound could be coming from behind him or even a mile away. In a panic, he yells as loud as he can. The howl gets closer, and he knows his cries have given his position away. Hoofbeats begin to pound out of time with his own rapid heart. His knees begin to burn knowing whatever's behind him will be his death. Fire flies past him. The beast flees into the forest and Grandpa's fellow tribesmen appear. They'd known the howl of the Wendigo, but didn't know Grandpa would encounter one. Grandpa gets a break and doesn't need to catch a deer, a Wendigo survival was enough proof to be a man. A wealthy man wanted to go hunting in a part of northern Canada where few people had ever hunted. He traveled to a trading post and tried to find a guide to take him, but no one would do it. It was too dangerous, they said. Finally, he found an Indian who needed money badly. And he agreed to take him. The Indian's name was Defago. They made camp in the snow near a large frozen lake. For 3 days they hunted, but they had nothing to show for it. The third night a windstorm came up. They lay in their tent listening to the wind howling and the trees whipping back and forth. To see the storm better, the hunter opened the tent flap. What he saw startled him. There wasn't a breath of air stirring, and the trees were standing perfectly still. Yet he could hear the wind howling. And the more he listened, the more it sounded as if it were calling Defago's name. Defaagol it called. Defaagol, I must be losing my mind, the hunter thought. But Defago had gotten out of his sleeping bag. He was huddled in a corner of the tent, his head buried in his arms. What's this all about? The hunter asked. It's nothing, Defago said. But the wind continued to call to him. And Defago became more tense and more restless. Defaagol, it called. Defaagol. Suddenly, he jumped to his feet, and he began to run from the tent. But the hunter grabbed him and wrestled him to the ground. You can't leave me out here, the hunter shouted. Then the wind called again, and Defago broke loose and ran into the darkness. The hunter could hear him screaming as he went. Again and again he cried, "Oh, my fiery feet, my burning feet of fire," and then his voice faded away, and the wind died down. At daybreak, the hunter followed Defago's tracks in the snow. They went through the woods, down toward the lake, then out onto the ice. But soon he noticed something strange. The steps Defago had taken got longer and longer. They were so long no human being could have taken them. It was as if something had helped him to hurry away. The hunter followed the tracks out to the middle of the lake, but there they disappeared. At first, he thought that Defago had fallen through the ice, but there wasn't any hole. Then he thought that something had pulled him off the ice into the sky. But that made no sense. As he stood wondering what had happened, the wind picked up again. Soon it was howling as it had the night before. Then he heard Defago's voice. It was coming from up above, and again he heard Defago screaming, "And my fiery feet, my burning feet," but there was nothing to be seen. Now the hunted wanted to leave that place as fast as he could. He went back to camp and packed. Then he left some food for Defago, and he started out. Weeks later he reached civilization. The following year he went back to hunt in that area again. He went to the same trading post to look for a guide. The people there could not explain what had happened to Defago that night. But they had not seen him since then. Maybe it was the Wendigo, one of them said, and he laughed. It's supposed to come with the wind. It drags you along at great speed until your feet are burned away, and more of you than that. Then it carries you into the sky, and it drops you. It's just a crazy story, but that's what some of the Indians say. A few days later the hunter was at the trading post again. An Indian came in and sat by the fire. He had a blanket wrapped around him, and he wore his hat so that you couldn't see his face. The hunter thought there was something familiar about him. He walked over and he asked, "Are you Defago?" The Indian didn't answer. "Do you know anything about him?" No answer. He began to wonder if something was wrong, if the man needed help. But he couldn't see his face. "Are you all right?" he asked. No answer. To get a look at him, he lifted the Indian's hat. Then he screamed. There was nothing under the hat but a pile of ashes.
Looks like you just plagiarized The Wendigo by Algernon Blackwood.
It's actually from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Looks like it was adapted from Blackwood though, I'll have to give that one a read. Be 15-year-old me living in North Carolina back in '86 live in a city, getting into all the wrong habits and causing trouble at school and shit. Start getting into drugs. Dad puts his foot down, says I need to learn about the Red Road. Sends me to spend a month on my grandfather's farm, deep in Cherokee Res territory. I'm like half Cherokee, but at that point in my life I never really knew anything about my origins. Grudgingly agree, but secretly pack my Nintendo and all my games. Granddad comes to pick me up in his rusty old Ford. Pulls up in front of the house, big hugs for me and Mom and a handshake for Dad. "How're ya Johnny, I've missed you, ya never visit anymore since Ruthie passed." He's a grizzled old Nam-vet with a native pride hat on, I can hardly understand him through the thick southern accent and his speech impediment. We leave my home, drive about an hour south into the deep woods/country. Cross the border into Cherokee land, he mutters something that sounds like aho. Get to the farm, Grandma comes out, big hugs all around. Meet all 12 of my cousins whom I've never even heard about before, and my uncle standing there. Old ramshackle farmhouse, run down but cozy. It's about dinner time, so we go inside. Grandma made breakfast for dinner, it's fucking cashew. Full stomach, much tired, many yawns. Go into living room, see really old TV. Hook up Super Nintendo, mesmerize the country cousins with the wonders of Dr. Mario. These kids haven't ever seen video games before, they're hooked. About 10 at night, Gramps says it's time for bed. We all retreat into the attic and horse around until about 2 a.m. It's about 3 now, I can't sleep, tossing and turning. Much snoring from the cousins, I know they're all out of it. Get up to get glass of water, walk down the stairs. As I'm filling my glass at the tap, I hear the strangest fucking thing I have ever heard in my life. It's like a howl and a roar at the same time, and it came from the backfield. Grandpa comes running down the stairs in his long johns, his eyes wild. "Grandpa, did you hear that? Was it coyotes or something?" "That was no coyote, Joe. Go back to bed now, I'll handle it." Grabs his Ruger and goes out the front door. I walk back up the stairs and into the attic. All the cousins are up, talking rapidly. "Did you hear that, Joe?" I nod. Cousin Freddie comes over, looks me dead in the eye. "Did Grandpa go out there?" "Yeah, he did. Why?" "Shit, that's not good." "Why? It's just a wolf or something." They look at me like I have 5 heads. "He don't know." "Should we tell him?" "Nah, if Grandpa didn't tell him, he don't need to know." Sit on my bed. "Guys, what's going on?" "Just go back to sleep, Joe, it'll be fine." "Whatever." About 4 a.m. now, I'm still up. Hear 2, 3, then 4 shots from the direction my grandpa went. Hear that crazy howling noise again. Decide he's got it handled, and try to fall asleep. No luck. 5:30 rolls around, cousins all start to wake up. "Come on, Joe, get up, we gotta go muck the horse stalls. Get dressed, go downstairs." Grandma has once again outdone herself. Breakfast is ham steaks and grits and biscuits with chicken gravy. Finish eating, go outside. Grandpa is in the backhoe, digging a huge pit in the backyard. There's something wrapped in a tarp a few feet away. See a hoof sticking out. He turns off the backhoe and hops down from the seat. "Something came over the fence and killed one of our cows last night. I don't want any of you going out past sundown anymore." "Yeah, here. Yep, good. Now help me get Crooked Arrow in her hole before the flies come." We heave the dead cow, tarp, and all, into the grave. He gets back into the backhoe and buries her. Fast forward to 6-ish, me and the cousins are in the barn shoveling horse shit. Should we tell him yet, guys? Shut up, Roxy, Grandpa doesn't want him to know yet. Dufuck.jpg. Continue shoveling horse shit. Cousin Roxy comes over into my stall on the pretense of showing me how to properly muck a horse stall. We're using pitchforks to shovel the shit and hay into piles. She gets wicked close, then suddenly pins me against the wall. "How much do you know?" "What?" "Quiet down or they'll hear you." I said, "How much do you know?" "Well, I know math, and history, and stuff." "And Grandpa said you city people were smart." "I meant about the spirit, dummy." "The what?" She sighs. "It's called a Wendigo, a forest spirit. It eats people and animals, and we don't usually get them around here, but this one has been in the area for about a week now. Grandpa refuses to call the tribal council, says he can handle it himself." "Okay, so what?" I don't really believe her at this point. "So, we need to do something. If this thing keeps killing cows, we won't have anything to make money off of." "What can we do? Grandpa won't let us help." "I think I can change that." We finish mucking the barn, then go to play outside. They show me the lay of the land, the fields, and the woods and shit. It's pretty cool, very peaceful. They bring me to a fire pit in a clearing and everyone sits around it in a circle. Cousin Freddie lights the fire. "All right. It's been brought to my attention that the Wendigo has come to our land. Grandpa won't tell us the truth, but it's pretty obvious. What are we gonna do?" "Explain things to Joe first, he probably thinks we are all crazy." They tell me everything. Apparently, the thing that killed the cow is called a Wendigo, and it's a forest spirit. The Cherokee have told legends of the Wendigo for generations, so I know a little bit about it but not much. At this point, I still don't believe them, but I'm starting to think that it wasn't a coyote or a wolf. We finish the discussion. Cousin Roxy pulls a cigarette out of her pocket. Can I have a drag? Shut up and watch dingus, this is important. She breaks it open and scatters the tobacco into 4 little piles around her. North, south, east, and west. I still have no idea what's going on. It's an offering to the Great Spirit so that he will guide us in these troubled times. Oh, it's old tribal bullshit. Cousin Freddy punches me in the stomach so hard I can't breathe. Watch your mouth. This is what we believe around here, so get used to it. After the fire dies down, we go back to the house. Lunch is ready. This time is corned beef hash with collard greens. Fuck yeah. JPG we play some more Nintendo until dinner. Dinner is the full fried chicken treatment, fucking fantastic. After dinner, we all sit around the table talking. As Grandpa is telling us how he lost his big toe in Nam, I hear the howling noise again from the backfield. Everyone is suddenly silent. Grandpa gets up, grabs his rifle again. Grandma looks worried. James, don't go out there, it's dangerous, please don't go. I have to. Before it kills one of the oxen or horses, I have to then take Jim with you, don't go alone. Uncle Standing Bear gets up and grabs his revolver from his jacket. Grandpa looks around the table at us. Me, and every one of the cousins are on our feet now, staring him down. All right. Listen up. There's something out there killing our animals, and it's not gonna stop. If you're going to come with me, we need to set some ground rules. Oh shit, we're going out there? First off, stay on the path. There's swamps out there, and the gators will eat you alive before you can scream. Second, keep your safeties on at all times until you're about to shoot. I don't want any accidents tonight. And third, you listen to everything I say. This is not optional. No one goes off alone, and you all obey my orders, got that? Yes, Grandpa, good. Follow me. He takes us out to the shed, and unlocks the padlock. I expect farming equipment, but instead I get more 22 long rifle sporters than I can count. We each get a rifle, a spare mag, and a flashlight. He closes up the shed. Our little ragtag group goes into the woods, following the path from the backfield. Grandpa holds up his hand for us to stop, and bends down. He's looking at something on the trail. Tracks, and they're fresh. We need to be careful. Continue down the path, every once in a while stopping to listen or look at tracks. After about an hour, I realize something. Grandpa, we just went in a giant circle, I've seen that tree before. I look down and sure enough there's our footprints in the mud. Along with a strange 3-toed claw mark I've never seen before. Then it dawns on me. We aren't following it, it's following us. Before I can even finish the thought, Grandpa gets really low to the ground and motions for us to do the same. We squat in the mud and listen. Strange hissing noise from off to the left. Grandpa, listen, to the left side of us, listen, do you hear that? It's close. Shut up and stay down. I look off to the left side of the trail. Lots of trees and thick brush obscure my view. Look up about 3 more feet when suddenly. The glint of a pair of eyes. Holy shit, shoot it. Complete chaos, I fire a gun for the first time in my life. Angry shrieking howl, this time much louder. Something big runs across the path and back into the woods. Damn, I think we hit it. Should we chase it? No, I know we hit it at least 10 times, if that fucker isn't dead yet it's never gonna be. We hike back down the path to the house. At the edge of the woods, Grandpa motions for us to stop again. Points up the hill towards the house. 8-foot shadow standing in front of the back fence, complete with a pair of bright yellow eyes staring us down. It starts running at us. We scatter, everyone shoots at it. Hear it roar again. Suddenly it's about 5 feet in front of me. Too dark to make out, but I see lots of shaggy matted fur and what looks like long jagged claws. Piss myself on the spot. Hear Grandpa shout something. Hear rifle shots. The thing runs back into the woods. What the actual fuck was that? Not now. Everyone inside. We go back inside. Did you get it? Grandpa shakes his head. Grandma sits at the table. We're safe here, it can't enter a dwelling without permission. I thought that was vampires. Vampires don't exist, dumb shit. Where do you think their legend came from? Oh. Grandpa, what are we gonna do? We're going to stay inside and pray to the Creator that it doesn't kill any more of my animals. Jean, get the tribal council on the phone, tell them to get someone out here as soon as possible. The next day, Grandpa takes me home in his truck. As we sit outside of my house with the engine running, he gives me a hug. Well, I know it wasn't as eventful as city life, but did you at least have fun? Of course I did, that was crazy. Good. And not a word to your father about this, he won't believe it and he won't let you come hang out with me anymore. Okay, Grandpa. Now I gotta pick up bread still. My face when that was the best summer of my life. My face when I still go back every year.